welcome to episode 67 of The Hard Truth About B2B E-Commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger. I'm here with Tim on an actual nice day, finally.
It is a beautiful spring-like day, just a few days away from the actual first day of spring. Timothy Peterson here. So happy to do another episode. I'm glad we're up to 67. I'm looking forward to 100 already now that we're this deep into the 60s. This is great. I'm going to pause for a moment for messages about our sponsors, and then we're going to pick up from there. Our first sponsor is PunchOut2Go. PunchOut2Go is a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. PunchOut2Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. With their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for PunchOut catalogs, electronic purchase orders, invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents in order to accelerate business results. Balance is our other sponsor. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com, book a session, and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Okay, everyone, I hope you really enjoyed hearing about our sponsors. Thank you to both of them for everything that they've done to get the hard truth about B2B e-commerce out into the world. Isaiah, I'd love for you to introduce our guests. I'm so happy to hear from one of our sponsors. Correct?
Yeah, so I'm excited to introduce Troy Lynch, who we've been talking to for a while from PunchOut2Go, which I know you have an announcement because we will probably have to make a change to our sponsor slot soon. So Troy, I'll let you kind of speak to that and what's going on, because I think sure we're gonna have to redo that.
Awesome, guys. Very excited to be joining you here today. I know we've been planning to do this for a while. Everyone's been so busy, but really excited to participate and share some of the things we're seeing that's occurring in the industry, particularly in the last few years with some of the disruptions related to COVID, but then also share some of the news that we're going to be putting out there in the coming months about changes going on within PunchOut2Go too. So exciting times all the way around.
And you are now the president. I know Brady's still there. So can you just explain your role in PunchOut2Go? And
yes, I'm now the president and CEO of PunchOut2Go. I've been with the company now for 2 years. I started working with the two co-founders, Brady and Sean, several years back, and went to work on helping to scale the business, work on our strategy for growth, for scale, for product road mapping, and obviously all the investment areas that we've had in the company over the last few years. We've more than doubled in size of our number of employees. We've invested a tremendous amount in our product, technology, services, security, all the things that are top of mind of leading enterprises today in the B2B space. So really happy to be leading the company now. Brady left it in great shape as he headed out to new endeavors, and he's certainly still very much involved in the passion and the energy that has been poured into PunchOut2Go for now over a decade. I mean, it's been a decade since we started this journey, and the batons that we're handing off now to all the new talent that we're bringing in at the leadership level and across the company. I know how excited Brady and Sean are to see how fast and how far their company has grown and come since they started it up over a decade ago. So very exciting times.
How would you describe PunchOut2Go now? I know it historically has been, somewhat of boxed into the name Punch Out and handled some Punch Out functionality for customers. But how would you describe it now and where you guys are going?
Yeah, I think when we were founded a decade ago, our mission was very simple, right? To streamline and automate trade between B2B buyers and sellers. And the way that we did that was by making it easier for sellers to leverage their e-commerce site that they were investing in, and buyers to leverage e-procurement systems and to connect the two, eliminate cumbersome and inefficient manual processes that were very, very common in B2B purchasing. So that was our passion, our vision, our mantra, and that's what we continue to do. Nothing is different today on the Punch Out side. I would say over the last several years, we've established ourselves as the leader in Punch Out. And we have scaled that business now with over 3,000 B2B companies that we're providing Punch Out capabilities to. But during that period also, we began to offer other solutions to our customers around automation of orders and invoices and order acknowledgements and shipping notifications and all of the other type of transactional data that flows between a buyer and a seller. So with that, the Punch Out process was the initial, how am I leveraging my procurement system to go and have a better experience of purchasing through an e-commerce site and bring that back into their e-procurement and approve that spend. And then obviously the next step was issuing an order. So why would we not help our clients in automating that transaction and then all the way through to invoicing? And so that transactional data that we now manage for our clients has evolved from being just Punch Out, where when that was completed, we were done, to now all the way through the commerce lifecycle of actually helping them automate these orders and payments and so forth. So that has been something to build upon from the beginning. That was just Punch Out, that now includes orders, invoices, quotes, notifications, acknowledgements, etc. And that's something now that we see more and more of. Not only our customers have been with us for that decade, but all of our new clients that we onboard each year are utilizing those type of solutions. So, really there's been three pillars of where have we changed the most in this decade. And I would say clearly on the technology side, with managing these other solutions that we offer to automate transactions between buyers and sellers. I would say certainly around the area of services and support, we've invested heavily in being a fully managed solution, cloud-based, where as you get into the complexities of integrating, hundreds or thousands of trading partners, we remove that complexity from the buyer or the seller. We normalize those integrations and automating of that data on our platform. And we surround that with the years of expertise and talent that we've been able to accumulate and has been involved in this now for a long time, to take on all the services related with implementation, support, onboarding of our customer and their trading partners. And I would say that, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll let you finish, and I have a question for you.
Yeah, the last kind of pillar, technology services, would be the fact now that we've accumulated these thousands of buyers and suppliers, and we have a network of them that now we're introducing to one another and trading between them across the many industries we serve, with life sciences, manufacturing, distribution, healthcare, hospitality. We're starting to see that there's real benefit in providing buyers access to more suppliers and suppliers more access to buyers, whether that's for supply chain diversity, right? Supply chain risk management, helping them better with their retention, or meeting other potential trading partners that are Punch Out ready and have I would say embraced automation and digital transformation as part of their business.
So where I was going to go with this, I think you partly answered it from your excellent explanation there, but it sounds like you're on the path to unicorn status, or however you want to look at it, right? You're really, growing in growing in a lot of directions and creating this ecosystem really around the business. It's no longer, X over here, it's X, Y, Z, and, all of the things that connect to it. So are you looking to grow organically through acquisition, by being acquired, all of the above? I mean, how are you thinking about your growth path now that all of this is happening?
Well, all of our growth has been organic, right? We have grown over 74% year over year the last 2 years of onboarding both customers and trading partners. And that has been us investing in our business, investing in sales, marketing, product, technology, delivery services, all the things I mentioned. And we're growing, we're outgrowing anyone else in our space. And we've accumulated this ecosystem now that has reached a tipping point, whether it's buyers and sellers or all the partners that we work with in the industry, right? Commerce partners, e-procurement partners, the agencies that implement them. So we've got this massive ecosystem that we're in the center of. We're the ones enabling, whether that's marketplaces, where now we're very much involved with that, whether it's a buyer wanting to onboard suppliers or suppliers working with their buyers. All of that has been through our ability to invest in our business, which we raised capital to invest in our business last year. And we announced that, and that was very exciting news for PunchOut2Go. To have Susquehanna, who is our investment partner, came in really believing in our business, both historically and the future of it. And, it's taken a decade to earn the status. It's taken a status of being the leader in what we do, but also to accumulate all of the trading partner and the network that we have now of buyers, sellers, and industry leading partnerships. So with that, I feel like we're at a position to really, really launch ourselves into a whole nother realm of growth. Very exciting for us. Part of what's driving this growth too, as you all know, is the continued adoption of e-commerce and e-procurement. And it's pretty interesting. And last year, e-procurement spend reached almost $1 trillion, B2B sales generated through e-procurement. Going back when we started this 10 years ago, that was nowhere near $1 trillion, right? But to hit 934 million and certainly on pace to exceed 1 trillion in 2022, that goes back to what we felt was going to occur, right? That more and more sellers were going to sell through digital channels such as commerce and marketplaces, and more buyers were going to be purchasing through spend management tools such as e-procurement. And as that adoption has continued to accelerate, and COVID certainly helped accelerate that even faster, it's only benefiting our solution and the platform that we provide to connect buyers and sellers that are trading through e-procurement and e-commerce.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys are really seeing massive growth. But I think a lot of B2B companies, they're not growing at 74% a year. I can tell you that. Some are, but what do you see the manufacturers and distributors doing that is working, or that, like, what are you seeing as the differentiators between the ones that are really innovating and winning this COVID complexity and the ones that are kind of stuck in the mud? Because I feel like we see a lot, and we often turn people down because we're like, we don't think it's a good fit to that. It's almost like the problems are so big to overcome that we're like, oh, we're not going to touch this project. So.
Yeah, I think we've clearly seen that companies are looking to get out of manual transactions. So this, trend towards digital transformation and automation is something that has been even more top of mind with businesses coming out of COVID. You look at, I think it's a reality that the more sales channels a B2B company are able to offer to enable purchases, the more likely the company was to gain share, particularly during the pandemic. And I think all of that is coming back to high adoption rates on the commerce side and on the procurement side. You look at, even Gartner came out with a recent report that, by 2025, 80% of B2B sales interactions between suppliers and buyers will occur in digital channels. Now, if that's the case, we're certainly at this hockey stick ramp up, because we've been doing this for 10 years and we've seen a slow increase, or I would say a normal increase in the adoption rate of e-procurement and e-commerce in B2B. But it sort of reminds me of where we were with B2C 10 years ago in the brick and mortar and adopting e-commerce, where we're at this hockey stick where it's really now not should I do it, but what happens if I don't do it, right? Like, am I going to be at a competitive disadvantage?
Yeah.
And this is what happened with brick and mortar, that resisted it to the point where they said, oh my gosh, now we're at a competitive disadvantage. We have to do
us and, Borders, all those bookstores that kind of went out of business and things like that. Yeah, they just couldn't adapt, right?
Yeah. So to give you an example, I mean, even in the last 2 years, if I look at 2020 and 2021, we've seen over 100% in transaction volume increases. So whether that's punch out, PO, invoice, notifications, quotes, we actually had a 4,000% increase in quotes, 108% in notices, notifications, 105% in punch out. I mean, we went from processing 10 million transactions in 2020, which was a record for us, to 18 million in 2021.
Wow.
So that goes to show you the volume that is starting, and the fact that we're reaching $1 trillion now in spend that's originating e-procurement. You can see the ramp that's really taking place over the last 2 years. It's pretty impressive.
So where do you see e-commerce playing how does e-commerce fit into this? Because e-procurement, you have some of these things that are kind of behind the scenes. You have these ERP systems. Like, what would you advise a B2B company to be doing or thinking about e-commerce in the right way? Should be they thinking about it as a marketing tool, a sales tool, automation tool? Like, it's kind of all of the above, and that's where I think people get tripped up, right?
All of the above. Yeah.
Yeah, like, is it marketing? Is it a sales tool? Is it there's so many different ways that you can make it useful for the business, and it's hard to kind of balance that,
Yeah, and again, there was pretty rapid continued growth, 17, 18% in sales that were through B2B commerce in 2021. So that's still growing at a good clip. I would say, as a B2B supplier, you have to remain competitive ultimately in serving your buyers, your customers. And those buyers now are looking for diversity or ways to augment their supply chain to not be disrupted. And how can you serve those buyers better? Obviously, there's still a large amount of manual transactions, still 48%, almost 7 trillion of B2B spend is still in a manual process, meaning I'm sending you an email or I'm faxing you an order, or I'm calling in an order. And I think more and more buyers want to get away from that for lots of reasons. They want to automate, they want to be able to manage spend, they want to be able to run it through the systems that they've invested in to help them manage spend, such as e-procurement. So we see all the time where suppliers would come to us and say, hey, my buyer says I have to support this, or they're going to find another supplier. And by supporting this, they mean I want to be able to have a punch-out experience into an e-commerce platform that gives me real-time visibility into inventory, gives me real-time contract pricing, and I can bring that over as a requisition to approve a PO and send it back to you, all in an automated manner. And that pressure is starting to hit suppliers now because more and more suppliers are adopting commerce. So as they do it, then it becomes how much of my traffic, I don't want that just to be a nice shiny new toy that's out there as a website. How do I drive more traffic through e-commerce? And the goals initially, as you know, Isaiah, are if I can get 10% first year, 20% second year, 30%. If I go back 3 or 4 years, that was kind of the model. I would say that serious B2B suppliers that are investing in commerce are accelerating that too. They're going, hey, no, I want first year to be 20%, second year to be 50%. By year 5, I want to have 80% or over.
Wow.
And I think all of that too is feeding back into the fact that that's how buyers want to purchase now. And it's not that unusual. Again, if you go back to B2C and you think about the same experience, right, where buyers were going into brick and mortar stores saying, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to have an online experience, an omni-channel experience where I get the same type of service or product or goods online that I can get in going to a store. And I think B2B is starting to look at this as how do I deliver my capabilities, my goods, my services to my buyer in the way they're choosing to buy. And more we're seeing from our statistics, from the companies that are joining our platform in order to automate these transactions, they want to purchase through e-procurement or through e-commerce.
So let me bring up a couple things that touch on this, because I think that our listeners have heard, some bits and pieces of this from other guests as well. For whatever reason, I've been immersed in some real estate deals recently. Some were B2C, let's say they're, just like a family selling a condo. So, and I was also working on a project with a commercial real estate concern. And what's fascinating to me, and the reason that I bring it up, is that even that area, which was so dependent on a person going to a place and meeting and having a lawyer in a room for a closing and all of that is now digitized, and largely, the transactions are happening in a completely different way. And this all happened in a very accelerated pace. And this is also, the world that we're talking about, because I'll just give a 10-second, example here. The closing for the sale of a condo was entirely virtual, with wire transfers happening of everything and a video and DocuSigns. There was no in-person anything. And now it's like, well, wow, if that can happen, so can anything. And I think the key,
I feel like that was the last thing to happen, because I remember going to sign some property documents, and like the one thing they really didn't want to do in DocuSign was like the rental, just property. It was like
they did it. This was in Massachusetts, by the way. This was in Massachusetts, in Dracut. It happened in Dracut in Massachusetts this week. And so completely virtual. No, it's extraordinary that actually happened. There had to be some paperwork sent back and forth beforehand. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that there was an e-commerce aspect to this early on. So the realtor and the buyer of this property, what happened is the buyer went on site to the realty site, and they were able to click something to talk to a realtor live and to get a virtual view walkthrough of the property before actually going there physically. And so it's like, if that can happen for a commerce transaction, that's so applicable to B2B e-commerce, where it's like showrooming and a salesperson discussing something in great detail in order to get that high ticket item sold or that high ticket service sold. It really has transformed completely in the last couple of years.
Agreed. And whether it's B2C or B2B, the common thing is there's people behind these, right? There are people that are making the purchasing, right? There are people that are just making these decisions. So what are people accustomed to today, right, in their everyday lives, and how that they're purchasing and they're shopping and they're engaging with suppliers. So, it makes total sense if you learn what we've learned over the years of the value of e-commerce. one, you're going to be able to sell more product or kit more product or introduce more product as they're on a website, of promotions and those sort of things. Clearly, the real-time nature of e-commerce versus a static catalog, right? Or sending a catalog in the mail of inventory availability, the types of images or videos or things that you can do online that are really difficult to keep current in a more static manual manner. The ability for folks to have a personalized experience, right? So when they log into these commerce sites, the suppliers can, that authentication is driving them to their catalog, their pricing, but whatever personalization, order history, all these sort of things that is more difficult to get in a manual, whether that's via email transactions or phone calls or faxes or mailing out catalogs. So I think all the benefits that we've all experienced in the past decade of e-commerce, whether it's in a day-to-day personal experience of B2C or it's related to business spend, I think those benefits are still there. And now it's not only about B2B trying to streamline their process and reduce their costs and automate things in purchase decisions through e-commerce back into their fulfillment systems. It's also now they've got to be more mindful of, what does my buyer want? And if my buyer is giving all these other options that are marketplace driven or online driven, am I in a disadvantage? This goes back to the brick and mortar companies by not providing that to them today. So that goes back to, I think, if you're looking to grow and expand as a seller, clearly you're looking to reach as many buyers as possible across as many channels as possible. And I would say probably that leading channel today, maybe a lot more so than it was just 2 or 3 years ago, is e-commerce.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say, when do you think, at what point do you think it's too late for some of these people? Because I do think that B2B commerce is pretty complex. It's not as simple as, throw up a Shopify site and, your 50 products, or, some of these retail sites are pretty easy to do. I think one of the reasons B2B commerce or B2B companies have struggled is because B2B commerce is so much more complex, real-time pricing that maybe is specific to the customer. It's harder to display that. And that's coming from your ERP. You have to integrate that into the e-commerce. Like, it's just a much more complicated project. And a lot of times I feel like these companies are just not staffed to even know who to hire, what platform to choose. They just, if you don't have the right people to help you make those decisions. And I guess what I'm asking is, what point do you think it's too late to make this cultural shift? Because I think it's somewhat cultural too, right? Like, we're going to build the culture to do this well and execute, right?
Yeah, there's a few things there. I think first that you mentioned around understanding what the technology options are to you, what's the right fit, tying into your business requirements, who's ultimately implementing it and managing it and supporting it, the world that you live in. I think that there's a steep learning curve there that's been underway for a number of years, but it's folks trying to understand, what's the right platform for me? What's the right amount of spend for me? What's the right back-end integrations for me into my inventory management, my warehouse management, my order management, whatever that may be. It is complex. And I think that a lot of it now, you're seeing more and more agencies offering consulting services and more agencies trying to educate or becoming more platform independent, right? Hey, we support all of these platforms so that we're picking the ones that's a better fit for your business. We know there's lots, we work with over 50 e-commerce platforms, or historically we have. So there's lots of options out there. And we typically don't get into, we went agnostic with this a decade ago, right? We said, look, a buyer can't dictate what systems their suppliers are choosing. And a supplier can't dictate what systems, ERPs or spend management systems that a buyer wants to implement. So let's not you worry about that. We're going to support them all for you, regardless of what they're deciding to use on either side. We're going to integrate to them and connect them up. The reality is, though, on either side, there's over 150 procurement today and over 50 commerce and growing every day.
And ERP
you
is
throw in-
fragmented. I mean, I've hundreds of ERP systems, right? You have the big ones, SAP, but I constantly encounter these weird little ones that I've never heard of.
Oh yeah,
And
it's evolving every day, and I can imagine that from a technology decision standpoint, how overwhelming that must be, particularly if that's not your business.
yeah,
Right? Hey, I'm selling these widgets. I'm not. Why do I have to be so informed and knowledgeable in e-commerce? I just want to have it and I want it to work. And as happened, going back years ago on the B2C side, I would say that there's been success stories there and horror stories there, right? Of them implementing something that didn't work the way they felt it should work, or didn't integrate properly, or created more manual process than eliminating manual process, more headache. It's like anything else. Just because you prop up a website and say that's an open channel, if it's not a reliable channel or a good experience, it's working against you.
yeah, it's
Right?
almost
It's going to turn up. It's like, don't do it if you're going to do it wrong. And it's, so the educational piece, and this is something that we're going to start partnering with more folks, experts in the industry, to help the suppliers and buyers that come to us to connect them and automate them. Because the reality is, they've got a lot of decisions to make about their technology that, generally speaking, we're supportive of what those decisions are. We don't influence them. You choose what e-commerce you want, and we're going to support regardless of what platform it's on. But we do see the need where, they're looking for endorsement, or they're looking for education on the different platform options, the different agencies and service providers out there to implement and support. In some cases, they may have internal staff. Some cases, they may want to go and outsource that. But the faster that adoption goes and the faster that solution is working properly, the more value that we can bring in bringing buyers into that channel to shop for them, right? To shop with them. So with that, we're certainly, while we're not an e-commerce solution provider, we work with all the different platforms and the companies that implement them, but it certainly is beneficial for us and for the customer if we can help them streamline some decisions around partners to work with, whether that's platform partners or SIs or agencies that implement them. But you're absolutely right on that. On the first issue, there's no doubt that all platforms are not equal, and the implementation and integrations of them are not equal either. And that's an important element to get right and to understand what's the best solution that fits your business requirements or your budget.
So a couple questions for you. I mean, do you think, are there categories or industries you think that are further ahead that you work with? I mean, since you work with hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of, companies and different angles, who's further ahead and who's further behind?
It's a good question. I would say that we've seen in life science and healthcare a real spike in the last few years. We were seeing that in hospitality until COVID hit and kind of shut down hospitality the last 2 years, but I think that's going to bounce back as well. They were really looking at both buyers and suppliers, how to better automate that huge area of vendors and trading partners. Obviously manufacturing and distribution, you get into the world we're in, we're dealing with SMB, mid, and enterprise, right? When we onboard a company, a buyer or a seller, we don't dictate who they're trading with, right? That's their decision of who they're trading with. Therefore, we're serving SMB, mid-market, and enterprise, and the requirements across them and the adoption rates across them are very, very different. But I would say certainly at the enterprise level, we're seeing large investment in automation and digital transformation, pretty much regardless of industry. SMB, slower, right? I mean, it gets back to budget and what they can afford. And when they're doing it, it seems like they're more forced to do it than it's strategic to them. Meaning, hey, I've got this buyer. If I don't do this, they're not going to buy from me anymore. Therefore, I need to do it. That's not really strategic, right? That's being reactive. And in that mode is probably where you're saying, well, how do I do it fast, cheap, right? It's not strategic to my business, but I have to react to this request. And then you've got the mid-market that's probably somewhere in between. They may be still reactive, or it may be more strategic to them, and that they're really seeing the value or the differentiation that they can provide from others in their industry by adopting a more modern technology to serve their clients over. So it really is interesting. I don't know that any one industry is so far ahead of the others. I feel like everybody is kind of leveling up together, but clearly the bigger companies, the more enterprise-oriented companies, are investing more and more there, as you would expect, and it's making its way into the SMB market, and they're also making these investments.
So what scares me about this, and I've seen this, is that, you know, what happens when these SMB companies are too reactive, and just like you saw with the kind of retail, they can't do it fast enough, and you know, cheap and fast is hard, right? Especially we're talking about something this complex. Do they hit a point where it's just too late, or they did it too late, or they're trying to change too fast and it's just too big of a mountain to climb? You know, I foresee some of that happening when the rest is automating in a better way, or
yeah. And again, I think it's kind of deja vu from what went on with brick and mortar and retail and B2C, right? I mean, I think the same kind of trends are going to play out again, and they are. So yeah, I think some are going to be too late to the game, and they're going to have a hard time retaining trading partners or remaining competitive. Others are going to want to react and respond and get in, but they may not be as informed as they need, and therefore it's a bumpy start to that. And there's some challenges that they face that they'll need to overcome. Others, I think, are you know, maybe doing a little more work on their own internally in terms of research, or hiring outside agencies, consulting firms to help guide them on these technology decisions and integration decisions. I think it's a smorgasbord. I think it's all of this is happening. And then you get into, you'll see, you know, kind of the first generation of commerce, folks that, you know, stood it up and said, let's pilot this, let's see how it goes. I don't want to go all in with a enterprise level platform. I want to start on more of a lower end, fast, rapid, get it up. Let's see as a pilot how our customers respond to that, and the feedback we get, and then they move on to a second, in some cases now even a third generation of that as they up their investment. So that's not uncommon to see that approach to kind of putting a toe in the water to get feedback, to learn, and then formulate their business strategy around it, and then go more in as a second generation. So, but I feel like anyone doing nothing today around this area is probably at great risk for disruption.
Yeah, what I would add to that, because I think our listeners know, you know, I spend a lot of time having those transformation discussions with businesses of different sizes, and you know, for the smaller business, it's survival, right? I mean, often it's really like, well, if I don't do this, what will happen to me? You know, that is sort of where a lot of the conversations land. For mid-sized businesses, it's like, well, I need to do this because I have to compete in my space, and other people are doing this. They're still going to survive, and there's a time frame, and there's a movement and choices to be made. But you know, for the enterprises, as we all know, it's a different kind of conversation. It's like, well, we're investing in the future, and we've got all this other stuff that's happening, and you know, we're moving ahead, and we'll continue to innovate. But for a lot of those smaller businesses, it's really like, well, if I don't do something, what's going to happen to me by 2025? And it really is a very tough conversation to have, and say, well, you got to spend something, you got to plan something, or, you know, goodbye. I mean, and I don't like having that kind of conversation with anyone, but it's often the case.
Yeah.
There's a
Well,
reason
we
this
sometimes
podcast-
have that conversation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
I was
Isaiah.
gonna say, there's a reason this podcast is the hard truth about B2B e-commerce.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's the hard
Yeah.
truth. It's the hard
Well,
truth.
look, guys, this is not a one size fits all. And I think that there may be pockets. I mean, we talk to companies sometimes where we typically look at what's the complexity or the volume, right? Complexity or volume, meaning how many trading partners are you dealing with? And what is the volume of transactions and spend that's going on with that? And that the higher that complexity goes, and the higher that volume of transaction or spend goes, obviously you've got to be thinking about the channels in which you're going to serve that. If you have one buyer or one trading partner or two or five, a limited amount with a limited number of transactions, does it really make sense? Maybe manual works for you, and maybe they're happy with the way that they're replenishing or purchasing from you. And your question is it worth the cost to implement automation or digital solutions if they're not unhappy with what we're doing today, or we don't have the volume or complexity to really benefit from it? Again, if you're dealing with dozens to 100 to thousands of trading partners, obviously now you're going to have to cater to the needs to many more, and they're going to put requirements on you that you have to meet to keep them and retain them. Versus if you're an SMB and you're serving a limited number of your customers, and you've got a process in place where all is happy and it's working for you, and you're not dealing with complexity or retention issue with those buyers, and you're not adding a lot more, then you have to ask yourself, does it make sense to go and spend $500,000 on something that's not improving my business or my relationship?
I agree, but I also think there's still a risk there. There's also another side of that, like it's like the Uber effect, right? They might be doing that, but then what happens when Uber comes along, automates everything, and the taxis are all out of business, right? It happens so fast. I mean, I think the only time I ever take a taxi is occasionally from the airport because it can be convenient, right? It's like the taxis are gone.
Yeah.
What happens with your 5 customers? They're happy now, but the next shiny thing comes along and sells them on a better automated process, and all of a sudden they leave you, and then you just lost your, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, yeah. I'll give you another example too, because I was talking with, of all things, like a pool cleaning supply company, right? I mean, very, very primarily B2B, partially B2C. They largely,
I know that industry actually. It's decent. It's a decent sized industry.
It's a decent sized industry. In places like where I live in Long Island, New York, people love their pools. It's a thing, right? But what's happened, these particular folks I was talking to, is that they were doing everything manually, and they were around for decades, and it was like moving from one generation of the family to the next. Well, now everything's changed, because really consumers want to order everything online for that small piece of the business, and they don't want to deal with salespeople, and they don't want to have a person show. They just want it done, right? Schedule it online, show me where the truck is, tell me when it arrives, all this kind of stuff. So that piece changed first. The second piece, the B2B piece, the people who are like the actual installers or these other pool cleaning companies who would buy from this one and whatever, they can get stuff now from other suppliers in a very frictionless online e-commerce sort of way. And so if they don't change, they're going to lose those customers, right? So that's basically what's happened in the course of, I'll say, 2 to 3 years from what my understanding of their conversation. Just their business will be gone, because nobody wants to deal like, oh God, I got to wait for a call back. I got to get the pamphlet. I got to get them to show up. I got to go to a showroom.
Yeah,
So
like I want
that's
to click
what's
and buy this part because kind of what you need. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it'll be done. Those businesses will be done if they don't change.
Yeah, I feel like if you're, like I said before, if you're not doing anything, you're probably going to be disrupted. And we have a mantra here: either we're disrupting or we're being disrupted, right? There's no in between, and we've got to stay out on the forefront of what we do. But it goes back to, you think about somebody, for example, that is trading internationally, and the benefit of selling globally or buying globally, of having these online channels to do that. Just again, the more complexity, the more diversity you have in those that you're trading with. The more volume you have, the more regional scope that you have, whatever that may be. As that starts to ratchet up, and we can talk about where that sort of hits the tipping curve, it's like a tipping point. There's a no-brainer that you've got to have other channels than just manual transaction in order to serve
Cold calling.
leads, right?
Sometimes I ask people, like,
Yeah.
how do you get new sales?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, like, well, it's, you know, like, we get referrals. It's like, I mean, you want to be like in control of your business, and it's like something like just getting your business from referrals. It's hard to scale that, right? Like, it's hard to. So sometimes when you ask these questions, some of these B2B companies, how do you get new business? It's like you kind of get like crickets in terms of answers. Or I got one, they're like, oh, well, it's only like 6% of new business comes through the website. I'm like, 6%? Like, that's pretty. To me, that's pretty low, right? Like, I would, you know, our website drives a lot more than 6%. And we're B2B, you know, drives more than 6%, you know.
Have you seen a rapid increase in B2B in the last 2 years of consultative advisory?
Yes.
Let me educate you, because we see it all the time, right? I mean, and all of these folks that are coming to us, we have to educate on a lot of things. But in most cases, they've selected a platform, good or bad. You know, the experience may have been positive or not so positive, but it feels like to me that as I look at the e-commerce side, the supplier side, the opportunity is ripe to get in there based on their stage. You know, they first generation, second or third, based on their size, or they SMB or enterprise, to get them on a technology path that is the right path for them, with the right spend, with the right technology, with the right back-end fulfillment processes that are totally integrated, to make this a successful investment for them. And then we take it to a whole nother level of how we're automating access from companies buying into that channel. But it seems like to me that educational component, that advisory or consultative approach, so many companies need it, and it's got to be trustworthy, right? There's so many options that are used.
Here's the problem. So yes, one, I will say, I mean, that's part of why I started the podcast, because we're like, we just want to get more information out there, and we want to be unbiased, which I love. You got one of the reasons we went to you guys early is because you guys are platform agnostic. We didn't want to be like, oh, Magento's our partner, or whoever's our partner, you know, Adobe now, because then it's like we're just trying to sell this one solution, which is not what we're trying to do. But the problem is, and I just think it's such a hard problem to solve as a consultancy. We're getting better at it. From the Trellis perspective, I mean, I'm just speaking at the Trellis level, but I see it at other companies. Is like, and I just did this with another customer. They came to us. They're way in over their head with e-com and marketing, right? We did a code audit. They had so much technical debt, and it was clear they probably needed to re-platform, right? To simpler. We're probably recommending BigCommerce because it's a little bit easier. It's SaaS. But when we dig in deeper, they have like ERP system. They have Salesforce. They had Boomi, you know, Dell Boomi. Had all these systems. They didn't have one IT person. Like, you guys will do that. They're like, you guys will do that. I'm like, well, like, we're an e-com shop. Like, we know how to do integrations and Boomi, but like, I'm not like a Sage. They had like Sage 100. Like, I can't go in and like diagnose all their operations at every level of their business. And it's really hard, I think, for a digital agency, unless you're like, you know, massive, it's hard to staff experts in all those different areas to consult with them in all those different areas. So in that case, what I did is, turned out they actually had an ERP partner. I knew who they were. I reached out to them. I was like, guys, like, can you guys help them here? Like, maybe they have a managed IT service. I was like, they need to fix their back end before we even think about the re-platform on the front end. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
it's so hard to solve all these problems sometimes. And it's so hard for one agency to do them that I think it's almost that I think you need a network of agencies. I don't think there's one agency out there that is like, you know, fair, that is an expert in enough areas to really truly help these people.
Well, this is where the road mapping comes in, as I put it, road mapping instead of project management, right? Because you're really, it's like, okay, we're dividing this up now. It's going to be this stage, you know, in the roadmap, and then this stage, and then this stage, and then who's working on this stage, right? Who are all the people involved here? Okay, we finished that, so now we can get to this stage, and then maybe stage 2 in the roadmap is when e-commerce, can really shine again, right? Things can happen, but that's sort of the conversation I get in with a lot of people. And you do have to bring in, additional, I always call them SMEs, like subject matter experts, for all sorts of different things that happen in these kinds of
You
conversations.
basically need like an operational subject matter expert, like an ERP expert that's maybe unbiased, which that's almost impossible to find because everyone I know in ERP, they only know Sage or they only know, whatever it is, SAP. So it's so hard to find someone that can even give you an objective opinion on the back end systems because they all specialize in one or two.
Well, what's getting interesting now too is I think there's been enough adoption over the last, 6, 7, 8 years in B2B that folks are going into a second generation, third generation now. So they're maturing. There's still those that haven't put the toe in the water and they're struggling probably. But this is an interesting survey from DC360 as well of Digital Commerce 360, where they polled B2B sellers of how have the activities of 2021 changed your approach to e-commerce? Over 50% said they want to give customers a more sophisticated commerce experience, not a commerce experience, but a more sophisticated, which means they're, first or second generation trying to prove it. The second, again, over 50% was shift focus to investing more in our e-commerce site. Again, meaning they're probably first or maybe second generation trying to evolve. Number third, at 44%, focusing on a better user experience and adding more B2C-like features, personalization, customization. I go back to, we talk B2B, but it's still people.
Yeah.
And it's
Mark
Brohan
from Digital Commerce 360 has been a guest multiple times here, and he, we often talk about that, the B2C, B2B, connection here. It's like, we're all people. I want things to happen in a certain way. I have my mobile phone. I want to use my phone for B2B transactions. So I get it. I completely get that.
So what was interesting about this survey, if you probably go back 2 or 3 years, it seemed like to me back 2 or 3 years, it was wanting to focus on a e-commerce strategy or initiative, right? Implement e-commerce, try to drive more through. Now it seems like most of these folks are talking about how do they mature, improve, add sophistication, add personalization, add capability. The other one was adding more services to complement our current product assortment, adding products and product lines to our online channel to grow our online business.
Mm-hmm.
So you see the sophistication and the maturity now starting to wrap up, and there's going to be laggards that are coming behind. Probably not a bad place to be because they've probably learned a lot.
Yeah, or you can learn from all the mistakes or see where.
Follow the leader. Yeah, follow those that have the money to make those mistakes. So I don't think it's too late yet. But I think if you're setting on your hands another 2 years, you're going to have some major problems.
Yeah, I don't think I think if you're not investing in something now, like meaning you're investing in something that's probably going to go live in 6 or 12 months or 18 months, then yeah, you're going to be in big trouble if you're not in that process. I think that's the other thing is people underestimate. Sometimes these things take a while because you get into it, you gotta, refactor some stuff on the ERP, their product data is a mess, all of a sudden it's 12-month projects. That's what we see a lot in the B2B. To your point, the reason that B2B for us has become so much more consultative is because we can't just like slap on a website. It's like, well, what's the state of your product data? How do we do the integrations? We dive in, it turns out their ERP doesn't even have APIs. They're like, they're on like an old ERP system. So they're asking for things that are like almost impossible to do with their current state. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I always find kind of charming, I read a lot of surveys and see all kinds of data. One thing and I really mean the word charming here, is that there are people who still use dial-up, right? Dial-up for so there's always like this tiny little piece. There are people who still primarily use a landline phone. There are people who still actively use fax machines. There are people who still use beepers, right? So there's always like these little tiny cohorts where it's like, adoption of the new, and then there's this little piece of something that never really adopts. So I suppose that's true also for B2B e-commerce. There are going to be some people who are always going to be like so far behind that, you know, maybe it'll never happen and maybe they'll still survive somehow, you know, but it
Well,
really, I always think of it like landline phones, you know.
I think Isaiah hit a really good point here in that when you make a decision to go, you have to realize that that decision to actually execute and launch is 6 months to a year out, best case. You know, that's the reality here.
Minimum 6 months. I mean, I think that I get people all the time, oh yeah, we want it done in 3 months. I'm like, we could stand up a Shopify site in 3 months. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. That's their first reality is timing and budget, right? But you also raised another good issue of the complexity of legacy systems that have to connect up to a more modern system like e-commerce on the back end, right? Inventory management, warehouse, order management, ERPs. And the reality is some of these systems are very, very dated in the B2B space, in all spaces. And now you plunk in the new shiny e-commerce, but it's expecting to speak more modern languages, right, with APIs or well-known data structures. And now you're dealing with probably flat files or manual ways of transitioning these data. Yeah, it's a mess. And therein lies a problem of how are you getting data into the website, product data, right? And then how are you getting orders out of the website? And that integration between them can, in and of itself, take 3 to 6 months to 9 months, depending. So there's a lot of complexity when you start thinking about commerce. It's not, hey, I got a switch, I got a new channel, I'm selling online, let's go. There's a lot of planning, a lot of decisions and technology selection, platform selection, lots of different parties involved, not only maybe a consulting or an agency that's building the website, but then you get into integration partners or SIs or third-party solutions that do integrations to these back-end systems. That could be custom built, that it brings in a whole nother element of complexity and time and budget. So it's not simple stuff we're talking about, but I think the sooner you get into it and find that trusted partner that can advise you and guide you in the right way through these decisions, and then help you successfully implement it on time, on budget, meeting all requirements, business requirements. There is a tremendous opportunity for that right now in B2B at all levels. And the faster that we can help them on that journey, obviously the better that services and solutions like ours, they benefit from them.
Yeah.
We add a whole nother level of benefit to that. So I would love to help find ways to accelerate that implementation and adoption, given the fact that we all know you're going to have to do it at some point, or you're going to be disrupted.
And that's what we're doing right here. On the
that's awesome.
That's what we're doing.
That's awesome.
Here's a tidbit of information I think would really help people, and I can give you my answer, but I'm really curious to hear yours. Sometimes it's just knowing what's working for other people, and it could be a coincidence, but I don't think it's usually a coincidence. What are the platforms that you see that seem to be working well? And I know it's not one size fits all, but I'll give you an example. Like it seems like NetSuite, we're seeing NetSuite really take off. You know, I'm not saying it's the only ERP you should consider, but it seems like they've really taken off and solved a lot of the needs in B2B and B2C. But like, you know, what kind of platforms, whether it's Adobe's Magento, BigCommerce, NetSuite, Salesforce, like what are some of the systems that you're seeing? Like it can't just be a coincidence that you're like, oh, all these people doing really, really well are all using. I mean, it's kind of what happened, Shopify, right? Everyone realized, holy crap, Shopify is really good for small B2C sites. If you're not using it, you're just, it's almost like, why not? You know?
Well, it's a great question. And, you know, again, because we were agnostic to it, we're working with all of them, and I can share with you kind of what our suppliers are using. But I would say, you know, with NetSuite, it's a great example. We've seen the same thing. We partner with NetSuite on both the commerce side for suppliers as well as the ERP side for buyers. So we work with both sides of the channel for them. I would say, historically speaking, Magento Adobe has been a leader amongst the companies that we work with. Probably in the 15 to 20% of suppliers that are on our network are on Magento, Adobe, and that's probably not that surprising given their time that they've been in the industry.
They've been very B2B focused. Yeah, they've pushed hard in B2B over the last few years too, because they realized they realized Shopify and Salesforce kind of crushed them in the B2C game.
Yeah, exactly. We see some of the bigger and more common B2B players with HCL, with SAP, with Oracle. They have their presence, particularly with companies that are using other of their solutions, whether that's
like SAP, ERP. Yeah, you get the whole suite. Yeah.
We see Salesforce starting to put a big push into the B2B space, particularly enterprise.
Yeah.
Probably about 5% of our suppliers on our network now are running on Salesforce. You've got, Insight, Episerver, now Optimizely.
Yeah.
That, we've probably got about 10% running.
Wow.
Yeah. BigCommerce is, trying to really come on strong there in terms, as well as Shopify, of having an easy, let's get it cranked up and going.
Yeah.
Total SaaS-based solution. I mean, historically speaking, they're low. They're probably a percentage or less, 1% or less, just because they haven't really been in the B2B space that long. And but I see them really targeting that SMB space.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing, especially BigCommerce. They just launched the B2B edition, and they're really investing a lot in the B2B. So I see them making a pretty big push there. And Shopify will too, but I think BigCommerce is a little ahead of Shopify and B2B right now. So
yeah, and we support all these platforms. So we have our plugins. We're certified on their marketplaces, and again, we don't promote any over the other. So this isn't intended to promote. This is intended just to share with you what is being used right now by suppliers that are trading on our platform more commonly.
Well, I think there's an advantage of using something that other people use, because when you use this bespoke tool that no one uses, or not very many people use, it's hard to find agencies, it's hard to find experts, it's hard to find apps and add-ons. And I think that's one of the big learning curves that people don't realize. It's like e-com is not just like one platform. It's so many of it's an ecosystem. So you really want to buy into an ecosystem that's going to be a good ecosystem, which is why Magento has been so successful. And obviously, I think Shopify, BigCommerce are doing that well. Salesforce does it well. It'll be interesting. I think Optimizely is doing a good job. They're kind of in an interesting spot because they're Optimizely, but they were Episerver, they were Insight. So I'm still not like sure.
Yeah. I mean, we still work a lot with them and their distributor manufacturing space. They've really carved out a good reputation for themselves, and you do see that. You see within industries or verticals that companies will follow other companies of the platforms or the technologies that they adopt, whether that's on the procurement side or the commerce side. Mm-hmm. So not uncommon there. And part of that are those platform companies targeting those industries or doing something specific for them. But you also now, you got a lot of disruption coming into e-commerce platforms with headless. I'm sure you guys are seeing more of that.
Have you guys seen commerce tools yet pop up? Do you have any commerce?
Yes. Yep. Znode, Commerce Tools. We're seeing more and more of those as well. So it like when I said it's over 50 that we've worked with, and that's not even getting into custom. There's still a fair amount of custom built websites.
And I don't necessarily think custom is always about. I mean, so when we take a headless approach, we actually look at headless potentially as a custom option where we only have focused on, because we just can't do everything, it's too hard from the services perspective. We only do Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento or Adobe Commerce, and headless. But the thing about headless is it's so broad, like in theory, it could just be custom. So we're doing some custom headless sites. And when we say custom, what we're really doing is we're really integrating with what we think is the right back. Like they have a good ERP system or the right back office systems, we'll just bring that up into the front ends in headless. So it's like it's custom, but it's not really custom because all the data is coming from somewhere that they have. You know what I mean? So
Yes. Yep.
yeah.
So Troy, we're coming to the close of our episode 67 of the podcast. So
We got to do this again soon, man. We just got started.
I know. I'm thinking we do need to have you as a guest again, and we try to give our guests, a last word. Is there something else you want to make sure that our millions of listeners hear from you about B2B e-commerce?
I think we've covered a lot with B2B commerce today. What I'd like to share a little bit on is a announcement coming out soon from us that we're going to be changing our name from Punch Out to Go to Trade Centric. And we're very excited about that, and one of the things, first I want to say that, Trade Centric is going to be the same great team of people and partners and customers and owners and solutions and products. We just felt that it was time in this decade of the journey we've been on to have a name that more represented the total solutions that we now offer, the services we provide around them, and obviously the network that we've built over this decade. And we felt Trade Centric, being at the center of trade, central to trade between buyers and suppliers, and how we're automating those transactions, represented all that we do, including Punch Out, where when we first started back in 2012, Punch Out was all we did. Mm-hmm. And we've evolved that, and it's still central and core to what we do. So if there's one thing, we're still Punch Out to Go in our history and in our vision towards all things Punch Out and being the very best at Punch Out. But Trade Centric allows us an umbrella to encompass all the other things we do today and all the things that we're planning to do to continue to drive value for our customers around B2B transactions and automating them. So exciting news coming. Can't wait to launch that. You're going to love our new logo and our new messaging and all our new website.
I want a t-shirt, a hat, and a mug.
Yeah, you're going to send us all the swag. We'll wear it on the podcast because you guys are,
I'll wear it.
We're going to have to redo the sponsor slot, but I'd love to have you back. Let's say when you're settled into the new brand and we can talk about, what it is as the new brand, So.
Awesome. Well, guys, we'll have more coming on that. I look forward to updating all of our stuff with you as well, and certainly sharing some swag. But we'll talk more about Trade Centric as we transition here in the coming months. But we have a lot more topics to talk about too in this B2B space that I can't wait to. It's changing so rapidly, and it's great to talk with you guys and share your knowledge and ours. And all of this is helping to inform those that are listening to this podcast. So great stuff. Love what you guys do. Huge fans. I listen all the time and can't wait to be back. Isaiah, Timothy, great to see you both.
Thank you so much. It's been great to have you here, Isaiah. I'll let you close.
No, yeah, I just want to say thank you. Yeah, this has been exciting, and it's crazy. It's been over. Is it over 2 years now?
It's 2 years in a couple weeks, I think.
Okay, we're coming up on 2 years since we started this. So
amazing.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Great stuff, guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.